It was January, and the world had no idea anything was wrong. Inside a private hospital near Regent's Park in London, Catherine, Princess of Wales, was recovering from what the palace called a planned abdominal surgery. Officials said little. The public was told only to expect her absence for a few months while she healed. Nothing about the wording suggested danger. Nothing about it suggested a turning point. But somewhere between the operating table and the quiet weeks that followed, everything had already changed. Only a small circle of doctors knew it. The surgery itself was called successful. At the time, her condition was believed to be non-cancerous. That single word gave the country permission to stop worrying. Then came the test results. Routine screening after the operation uncovered something the surgeons had not expected. Cancer had been present all along, hidden beneath a diagnosis everyone thought was already settled. A mother of 3, a future queen, a woman who had spent her adult life in front of cameras, and now she was carrying news she could not yet say out loud. For weeks, she said nothing at all. No statement left the palace. No explanation reached the press. The silence was so complete that people began filling it with their own theories, each one stranger than the last. Hi, viewers and family. If you found out life-changing news like this, would you tell the world right away or hold it close first? Let us know in the comments. Because that was the exact question Catherine was living inside, and her answer would take nearly 2 months to reach anyone outside her family. In that stretch of silence, small cracks began to show. Her husband quietly withdrew from a public event, a memorial service for his own godfather. The palace gave only 2 words for the reason: a personal matter. No one connected it yet, but something was clearly being protected behind those walls, something too fragile to name. Weeks passed. Kate was not seen, not photographed, not heard from. For a woman whose every outfit, every wave, every small gesture had once been front-page news, that kind of vanishing was almost unthinkable. The public does not do well with silence. It fills the empty space itself. And so it did. Rumors moved faster than facts. Speculation about her marriage, speculation about her health, speculation about things that had nothing to do with the truth quietly unfolding inside that hospital room in January. None of it was accurate. All of it spread anyway. Because that is what happens when the most photographed woman in the world simply disappears. The absence becomes its own headline. Somewhere behind that silence, Catherine was preparing for something far harder than surgery. She was preparing to say the words herself, in her own voice, before anyone else could say them for her. A video was being planned, a message that would take something intensely private and hand it permanently to the entire world. And when she finally did press record, nothing about how the public saw her would ever look quite the same again.
I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you personally for all the wonderful messages of support and for your understanding whilst I've been recovering from surgery.
The video was recorded on a Wednesday. It was released to the world 2 days later on a Friday afternoon, timed with the kind of precision only a palace communications team could manage. By then, speculation had already spiraled far beyond anything reasonable. A doctored photograph had circulated days earlier, a simple Mother's Day image meant to reassure the public that all was well. Instead, it did the opposite. Photo agencies quietly pulled it from circulation. Analysts pointed to strange inconsistencies in a child's sleeve, in the alignment of a hand. The retraction only deepened the mystery it was meant to end. So when the video finally appeared, it did not calm a curious public. It landed on a public already convinced something was being hidden. And something was. Sitting outdoors, dressed simply, speaking directly into the camera, Catherine explained that January's surgery had seemed successful at first. Then came the follow-up tests. Then came the word no family wants to hear. She described it as a shock that arrived after what had already been an exhausting stretch of months. She was now in early treatment, preventative chemotherapy prescribed as a precaution, meant to reduce the risk of the disease returning. She did not name the type of cancer. She never would. But she said something else, something that mattered more to the people watching than any clinical detail. She said her children had been told in a way that made sense for them, gently, carefully, in their own time. For a royal family known for restraint, for keeping pain behind closed doors, this was something new, a future queen speaking plainly on camera about fear. King Charles, undergoing his own cancer treatment at the same time, said he was proud of her courage. Her brother posted an old photo of the two of them as children. World leaders sent their support within hours. But behind the sympathy, one question kept resurfacing. What kind of cancer was it? The palace never said, and in that silence, an entirely new chapter of speculation was about to begin, one far uglier than anything that came before it. Weeks after the video, a single photograph nearly undid everything Catherine had tried to control. It showed her surrounded by her 3 children, smiling, ordinary, healing. It was meant to reassure. Instead, wire services flagged it within hours. The Associated Press pulled it entirely, citing manipulation that did not meet their standards. Other agencies followed. A professor from Berkeley studied the image and pointed to visible inconsistencies, a sleeve that didn't quite align, edges that didn't sit right. Catherine issued a brief apology. She said only that she had, like many amateur photographers, experimented with editing. It should have ended there. It did not. The retraction poured fuel on theories already burning out of control online. If the palace edited one photo, people asked, what else was being hidden? Was she even the woman in the picture? Was she well? Was she even alive? None of it was true. All of it spread anyway. For nearly 2 months, Catherine had not been photographed by anyone outside her own family. No hospital visits, no walks, no official sightings. Then on March the 4th, she appeared, seated in the passenger side of a car, driven by her own mother, spotted near Windsor. It wasn't posed, it wasn't official. It was simply a woman on a normal day doing something small. For a public starved of any real glimpse of her, it was enough to briefly quiet the noise. But quiet in this story never lasted long. Because 3 months later, Catherine would have to do something far harder than sit in a car. She would have to stand, in public, in front of the entire world, mid-treatment, and let everyone see exactly how much the fight had cost her. Trooping the Color fell in the middle of June, and for months it had been circled on calendars as the moment everyone would finally know the truth. Would she come? Could she? 2 days before the ceremony, Catherine answered part of that question herself in a written statement more honest than anyone expected. She admitted she was not out of the woods. She said months of chemotherapy still lay ahead. She described good days and bad days, the kind of days where the body simply refuses to cooperate, and the rarer days when strength returns just enough to be used. It was not the language of image management, it was the language of someone living through it. Then came the appearance itself. She stepped onto the palace balcony beside her husband and her 3 children, dressed in white, composed, present. Cameras that had waited months for this single frame finally got it. For those watching closely, she looked thinner, careful, measured in her movements, but she was there, upright, smiling in a way that did not look forced. It became the image the public needed, proof that the video from March had not been the end of something, but the beginning of a fight still being fought in real time.
A month later, at Wimbledon, she returned again, this time seated courtside with her daughter and her sister beside her. The crowd stood. The ovation lasted long enough to become its own headline. She would later admit that even small outings like this took more out of her than people realized. Behind every calm public appearance sat weeks of preparation and recovery most people never saw. Summer turned into autumn. Chemotherapy continued in private, appointment after appointment, month after month, with no cameras present for any of it. By September, 9 months after that first surgery, something was about to change, something Catherine herself would later describe as one word: free. By the end of September, 9 months after the surgery that started everything, Catherine recorded a second video. This one felt different from the first. Where March had been about fear, September was about survival. She said the last months had been incredibly tough for her family. She said life can change in an instant, and that they had been forced to find their way through waters none of them expected to cross. Then she said the word the entire country had been waiting for. Chemotherapy was complete. She called the cancer journey complex, unpredictable, frightening for everyone close to the person going through it. She thanked the people who had carried her family through it, and she meant it. For the first time in 9 months, Catherine allowed herself something close to relief. But completing treatment is not the same as being finished. Anyone who has lived through cancer, or loved one who has, understands that distinction painfully well. October brought her first true public engagement since the ordeal began. She and William traveled to Southport, a town still grieving after a knife attack at a children's dance event had claimed young lives months earlier. It was not a ceremonial appearance. It was raw, human, and heavy with shared grief. She sat with grieving parents. She listened to first responders. For a woman who had spent the year fighting for her own life, she chose on one of her first days back to sit with other people's pain. By December, she stood at Westminster Abbey, hosting the Christmas carol service she had built from nothing years earlier. It was the clearest signal yet that the woman from that March video was returning, changed but not diminished. Then, in January, almost exactly 1 year after the surgery that started it all, Catherine posted 3 words that closed the loop the public have been waiting on since spring. She wrote that she was, finally, in remission. She called it a relief. She said she remained focused on recovery. She warned gently that adjusting to a new normal takes time. The country celebrated. Newspapers ran the story everywhere. It felt, for a moment, like the ending. It wasn't. Because 6 months later, sitting with patients at a hospital in Essex, Catherine would say something that the headlines had not prepared anyone for.
6 months after announcing her remission, Catherine sat with patients at a hospital in Essex, and she said something the headlines had not prepared anyone for. She described recovery not as a straight line, but a zigzag, not one smooth plane, as she put it, but a roller coaster, full of hard stretches that arrive without warning, even after the cancer itself is gone. It was a small comment, made quietly, in a room full of people who understood exactly what she meant because they were living it too. But it told the public something important. Remission was never the finish line. It was simply the next chapter of a fight that never fully ends, one the cameras rarely see. Through the rest of that year and into the next, Catherine's public life slowly rebuilt itself, piece by piece. She returned to Royal Ascot. She stood beside William at the Order of the Garter service inside St. George's Chapel. She laid a wreath for Anzac Day, dressed in the same quiet composure the world had come to associate with her. She remained selective, deliberately so. Where she had once carried one of the busiest schedules in the royal family, she now chose her appearances with care, protecting time for her children, for her own body, for a version of normal life still being redefined. By 2026, 2 full years after that first video, she had returned to something close to her old public role, though never quite identical to it. The woman who once moved through hundreds of engagements a year now measured her strength differently, understanding limits the version of her before January of 2024 never had to consider. What changed was not just her health, it was how she chose to speak about it. A future queen, standing in front of a camera, admitting fear, admitting fatigue, admitting that even recovery has bad days, was something the monarchy had never truly done before. That honesty is the part of this story that outlasted the headlines. Not the diagnosis, not the speculation, not even the remission announcement itself. It was a woman choosing to tell the truth in her own words long before the world was ready to hear it, and continuing to tell it even after the cameras assumed the story was already over. Her journey is not finished. Few cancer journeys ever truly are. And there is one detail from deep inside this story, tied to what happened in that hospital in January of 2024, that very few people have ever heard explained in full. It changes the way this entire 2-year journey should be understood. That is where the next video begins.